If turbulence makes you feel really nervous, terrified even, in fact it could even stop you flying altogether, then you found the right video. Welcome to my Turbulence series, where I explain pretty much everything you need to know through the entire flight about turbulence to make you feel much safer and secure on board airliners. My name's Flyman Simon. I've got about 350,000 followers across different platforms. I'm an airline captain and a fear of flying coach, and I've helped thousands of people, just like you, feel much better about flying. I've got a 30-year aviation career where I've been through the Royal Air Force. I've flown 11 different aircraft types. I've spent the last 11 years flying for the airlines on the Airbus A350 all over the world. In episode 1, we covered all of the basics of turbulence, so what causes it, why it ends up being shaky in the cabin while you're safe, how the aircraft is made to withstand all different types of turbulence, and why you may fear it a lot more than you need to from what you've watched and ideas that you've got about turbulence, and try to sort of debunk a lot of those fears. In today's video, we're going to talk about the takeoff, the climb, all the way up to that cruise level. It's probably one of the most sort of intimidating or scary parts of the flight because it's the beginning of the flight. That takeoff is so noisy, there's a lot of different forces. And then once you're in the air, that's when a lot of the fears just begin if you do worry about turbulence, because you don't know when it's going to happen, what causes it, and whether you're in any danger. So by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what to expect, why turbulence happens, what could be causing it, and when it may happen in your flight, so it's not going to surprise you anymore. You're also going to know exactly when you're safe. I call this sort of the seatbelt phase. It's the mandatory time when we have those seatbelts on and you're in the seat with the seatbelt fastened. And as you know, this is from as soon as we move off the gate all the way through that takeoff phase up to the climb. Normally around about 10,000 feet we turn off the seatbelts if it's nice and smooth, but if there's any reasons that I'll discuss within this video, we might keep it on for a little bit longer to make sure that you are safe. So don't worry if it stays on a little bit longer than normal. Okay, so while we've mentioned the seatbelt, let's get into that, and we're going to talk about that. During the takeoff and the climb, as I say, it is mandatory. We have to have, it's part of our checks. We have a check to say seatbelt signs on, so we know that you are safe and secure and you're locked into your seat. Because during that takeoff phase, obviously, that's when there's a lot of power, a lot of motion from the aeroplane. And we know that in those sort of lower levels, that's where the weather and these different turbulence types that I'm about to go through one by one in this video, so you understand them. We know that during that sort of phase, you're safe. Once we know we're clear of that, we'll switch the seatbelt signs off. Sometimes we even let the crew out because they're a bit more experienced at moving around the cabin and keeping themselves safe when it is just a little bit shaky, not too bad. Once we know that it's nice and clear, we'll switch those seatbelt signs off, and then you're free to get up and walk around the cabin. My top tip is always, if you're in your seat, have it loosely fastened at all times, even if the seatbelt sign's off. That way, if we switch them on, quick tightening the seatbelts, and you're nice and safe again. Now, if there's one thing to take away from this video, it is with the seatbelt on, you are completely safe. Sat in your seat with the seatbelt on, you know, even in the worst sort of forms of turbulence, people don't generally get hurt if they're sat in their seat. What if you're caught out of your seat? You're having a bit of a leg stretch, you pop to the toilet, it starts to get a bit of a rumble, or the seatbelt sign comes on. Don't panic. 99.9% of the time in turbulence, you could walk around the cabin. We want to take precautions and make sure that you're safe and have you in your seat. So do the next steps. Walk back to your seat, nice and calm. Steady yourself with the armrests or the arm, you know, the arms of the chair, like the crew do when they walk around when it's a bit bumpy. Get into your seat, click that seatbelt in, and you are absolutely fine. Once you're in there and it's fastened, there's no need to panic. You'll be completely safe. Now with that, let's go through these various different stages of turbulence that make people feel a bit uneasy. We'll break them down. Let's start off where every flight starts, which is the takeoff. I hear a lot of people say, I really hate turbulence, and before we even take off, it can be really, really wobbly when you're driving, or, you know, we're powering the airplane down the runway to take off. The aircraft can feel like it's slewing from side to side. So what causes that? Well, the wind, it does normally blow down the runway, but it can come from all sorts of different directions. As you know, just from walking around on a normal day, the wind can change direction. When it comes from the side, we call this a crosswind. Why does that affect the aeroplane? Well, it's best to switch to something like, say, a yacht and a great big sailboat to try and make it to an everyday sort of. I try to take these complex aviation topics and break them down to something that everyone understands. So if you think of a big yacht, big sailing boat with that huge sail, it only needs a 10, 20 mile an hour wind, and you can lift that 8, 10 ton yacht out of the water and, you know, sail along at 20, 30 miles an hour. Because if you can harness the power of the air, you can get some real big forces built up. And that's exactly what it's like on an aeroplane. So if I bring in my iPad where I can actually explain, I'll try and explain this. So if we're looking at this part of the aeroplane at the back, so if you imagine that's like a big sail on a sailboat, and then you imagine that it's driving down the runway at speed, or we're starting to build up speed. So there's the aeroplane. Now normally this one would be straight down the runway like this, and you wouldn't feel any wobbles. It would be, rather smooth takeoff. However, when the wind is coming from the side, that wind now hits this tail and it wants to push the aeroplane this way, which pushes the nose to the right. So the pilots, to keep the aircraft steady and straight down the runway centerline, they push the rudder to bring the aircraft left, and it keeps it running straight down the runway. Now, on a normal day, you don't get the same wind all the time, do you? You get big gusts, and we get that. So when there's a big gust, it wants to make the aeroplane turn even more, so we have to turn more. So as we're going down the runway, we are having a little bit of a battle. It's fine. We're trained for it. We know exactly what we're doing. But down the back, you have very little visual references, and it can feel like the aeroplane's really moving side to side. All we're doing is being in charge of the aeroplane, and we are keeping it straight on the center line of that runway to get up to takeoff speed so we can get off into the air and get us nice and safely away from the ground. Now, these small corrections can feel huge to you, but now you know why. You're ready for it, and it's just the pilots doing their job. One last point that is worth mentioning is that once we get off the ground, you can then get into, pretty soon, a little bit of a bumpy air straight away. So let's cover that. If you imagine when you're walking around a town centre and there's some litter walking around one of the streets, as the wind whips round that corner, the wind can sort of spiral and swirl. We do sort of get this effect at the airport sometimes. So when we're taking off, the air traffic control towers, the hangars, and all the other sorts of things at the airfield, when that wind comes whistling over them, you can see it's nice and straight. It hits all the buildings and it starts to tumble and turn. And when the aeroplane flies into that, it changes the speed and direction that the air goes over the wing. That ever so slightly changes the lift up and down, and that's what causes the shaking. The wing wants to fly slightly less, fly slightly more, back to normal. And that shakes the wing, which then shakes the cabin, and that is what turbulence is, explained in episode 1 I did. So that can be why sometimes, just as you get airborne, you can get a little bit of a wobble, and that's one explained straight away. Next, I'm going to get onto wake turbulence. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's what aeroplanes do. They go through the air, super powerful engines, and the wings going through at speed, and it churns and spins up the air, and that is what can cause something called wake turbulence. So let's explain that one. Have you ever wondered why there's big gaps between takeoffs and landing? And have you wondered if it's just by chance? It's actually not. It's air traffic control have strict procedures. It's a legal gap that we have to have between different sized aeroplanes. And it's because of this wake turbulence that I've just been speaking about. We have them separated to make them nice and safe. So that sort of wake turbulence dissipates. There's less chance of flying into it. So the aircraft ahead, as I say, it leaves a big disturbed sort of amount of air, which if you fly through can cause turbulence. So again, just get the iPad up. What happens is we have low pressure on top of the wing, and that's what causes the lift. So I have a low on top of the wing, and we have high pressure underneath the wing. Now, if you remember from your science lessons at school, that high pressure will want to equal out and go to where there's low pressure. And as the airplane's flying through the air, this ends up spiraling into a big spiral behind the airplane. And you can see that here, just underneath the airplane, as it's flown through, it's got big spiraled air. And if your airplane flies through that, that can be quite disturbed, turbulent air, and it can be really bumpy. So air traffic control leave a nice big gap between us. It happens on takeoff and it happens on landing as well, to make sure that those spirals have dissipated and died down by the time the next airplane flies through it. And that is what keeps you safe from wake turbulence. So once you get safely into the air and you're away from those sort of initial little parts of turbulence, you're then into one of the main ones, which is weather. I get asked all the time, is it better to fly in summer or winter? Summer could be bad because of big thunderstorms. Winter could be bad because of big snowstorms. And how does that affect the airplane? When is it best to fly? Is it better to fly during the day or at night time? So I'll try and explain as best as I can why cloud isn't really a precursor to turbulence. It can be, but also you can have a really, really smooth cloud. So we'll get into thunderstorms in a moment, but at first I want to talk about something else. In summer, the ground can get heated up, and this can cause huge thermals. So if we explain this, the sun beats down and obviously heats up the warm ground, which gets hotter and hotter. The sea actually doesn't change temperature much because it reflects a lot of the sun's heat, and it doesn't really change temperature too much. So the sea always tends to be sort of a bit cooler in summer, and the warm air rises. So we've got those red lines rising. These are thermals that gliders might fly into to get altitude without their engine. They'll circle around in these red thermals, which take them up into the air. And over the sea, it's cooler. So the cool air comes down, it sinks. So you've got these sort of elevators in the sky of air climbing up and then air coming down. If you've got this airport here, which is just here inland, this part here, and you're taking off, as you're taking off through those thermals, it might be a little bit bumpy, not too bad, but when you meet this big sort of weather front between the hot and the cold air, it can be quite bumpy as you take off and fly through it. It's not going to last very long, but at least you know it's there. And also in the cruise, when it's a really hot day, that hot air can climb quite high, and it still can cause turbulence at altitude as well. So that sort of explains that. We'll get on now to the thunderstorms. So the thunderstorms then, they can happen, as I said, during the summer when there's lots of energy and moist air coming up and causing those big tall cumulonimbus clouds, or the thunderstorm type clouds. And then in winter they can be there as well, but more likely in the summer when the energy is getting all that moist air up into the air. So why are thunderstorms really turbulent? Well, they've got so much energy in them and they've got so much moisture in them that they cause, again, very similar effect, but with a lot more power and energy, rising and falling air. And if you fly through that, it changes the speed and the direction of the air over the wing, and that is what gives us turbulence a lot of the time. So as you can see here, the aeroplane flying through, it's nice smooth air, and when it gets into that cloud, that huge amounts of moisture and energy going up and down, it's going to be rather turbulent and rather uncomfortable in that, which is why we avoid them. We can see it with radar. Air traffic control have radar, the plane does. You can see them out of the window a lot of the time. Even at night, they have lightning, so they light up and you can see them. During the day, they're very, very easy to see. So they're quite easy to avoid. They're only in one sort of concentrated area. So again, you can just fly around them a lot of the time and avoid them. And that's why they get rather turbulent, because as I say, they've just got so much energy in them, but they're easy to avoid. So try not to worry about that. So with summer covered, let's move on to winter. And people think that winter weather is going to be a lot more turbulent. So big snow clouds, they're going to be really turbulent, and all that icy, snowy weather is going to make it a really uncomfortable flight. And it isn't always the case. In fact, of course, those thunderstorms that we talked about in summer, they are quite violent, the updrafts and downdrafts. So that gives real bad, like severe turbulence if you fly near them, which is why we avoid them. Whereas in winter weather, to develop snow, those water particles have to sort of nice and calmly move up and down through the cloud to cool down, ice up, come back down, melt a bit, or add some more moisture, come back up and make that snowflake. And they're reasonably stable as far as turbulence goes. So you find that you can actually fly through a lot of winter weather and it is quite smooth without a little bit. Of course, you're still going to get thunderstorms. You're still going to get various different other types of turbulence, but generally don't associate winter weather with really, really bad turbulence. It isn't always the case. So hopefully that puts your mind at rest a little bit when flying in winter. If you like these explanations and talking you through all the different stages of flight, I've got a fantastic resource for you. I've got to put a little bit of a plug in here. It's called Your Pilot Companion, and it's about 2.5 hours of lots of different little chapters that stand, they stand alone, and each one will say at start to play the next chapter when the engines start, play the next chapter when you taxi onto the runway. And it's me talking you through each stage of the flight, what's happening, what air traffic are doing, the airline operations, the pilots, the crew, and everything else, what to expect next. And it's really, really helped a lot of people with just distracting them through the flight and giving them a little bit of a commentary right through the flight. I'll drop the link in the description. It's called Your Pilot Companion. Check that out, and I think it'll do the world of good. It gets some great reviews. Okay, finally, one more stage of turbulence to talk about. A lot of people say, I hate flying out of this airport, it's always bumpy, or I hate flying into this airport, it's always bumpy. So why is that? Generally, it's a lot of airports that have mountains or hills around them, and the wind comes from that direction over the hills and then hits the airport. And again, tumbled up air, mixed up air, generally means that you're going to get a little bit of turbulence, but it has to be in the right direction. So sometimes you can fly out of an airport and it can be really, really bumpy, and then you might fly 3 weeks later with the wind in a totally different direction and it's completely smooth. So don't always associate that airport's going to be horrible to fly in and out of. It might just have happened that your friend or that experience you had was because the wind was in the right direction. So let's try and explain again this one with a little bit of a drawing quickly. Looking at this sort of little bit of mountain range here. If you imagine there's an airport there, you've got your little aeroplane about to take off. The winds are coming in from this direction. They come up the hill And what happens, just like a ramp when you used to go on build a ramp in the street with your BMX or your skateboard, what happens when you go up the ramp? It gets forced up and into the air. It then hasn't got the mountain to force it up anymore, so it starts to tumble down, hits other mountains, it spins round, it comes over the top, and you end up getting this sort of tumbled, spiraling air, which can be quite a long way downwind from the mountains. If you're on an aeroplane that's then taking off and flying through that air, it's nothing that dangerous. It's just going to be a little bit bumpy, that's all. So the airplane takes off, and as it gets through, obviously it's going to be a little bit bumpy around here, and then you'll pass through it, continue flying on your way, and it can be just for a little bit of time. So please know that it's going to pass, and that is the reason why. So now you're starting to see that there's a lot of different times in the flight where you can just get little portions of it being turbulent. It's not going to be turbulent the whole time. So hopefully now that you understand that these things come in layers, they're at different times in the flight, and that they don't last forever, you're going to feel a lot more covered and a lot more reassured, a lot more educated, and you've taken away the unknown as well. So next time you're in that, think Flyman Simon or Simon said that this is probably because of the wind off the hangars or the wind off the mountains or wake turbulence from an aeroplane in front, or we're just passing through a cloud. It's not going to last forever. Got my seatbelt on and I'm perfectly safe. We've covered crosswinds, wake turbulence, thermal turbulence, clouds through winter and summer, and then obviously mountains and hills in the area, which also can kick up a little bit of turbulent air. All of us are expected. It's not going to take us pilots by surprise. We plan for it. We have fantastic, area knowledge that we get briefed on, flying out of in and out of different airports. Pilots pass on reports to each other. Air traffic control are fantastic. Our flight planners and operations departments keep us right and give us plans that are going to avoid most of the turbulence. We brief every departure, so we know that it may be coming up. And as I say, we know that it's coming. We know how long it's going to come. We're ready for it. Your job's easy. All you have to do is, if that seatbelt sign is on, adhere to it. Keep your seatbelt on nice and tight. When it comes off, loosen it, but keep it buckled up. And that'll keep you nice and safe if there's any unforecast turbulence or we hit any of these little pockets like I've talked about. Pockets is wrong because I hate air pockets. But little areas, the little layers that might bring a little bit of turbulence on, and you're going to be safe if it's loosely fastened and it's just a quick pull and it's nice and tight. So what else can you do if the turbulence gets you a little bit worked up and a little bit anxious? Well, your sitting position's good. Sit by a window. It's always good to have a horizon and try and keep yourself distracted. There are plenty of coping techniques in episode 5. That's coming soon, so subscribe so you don't miss that. Next, we're going to be talking about the cruise. This is the place where most anxiety lives. It's a big, long, stretched out time when at any point turbulence could hit. People get really, really worried about it. So I'm going to be covering clear air turbulence, which is also known as CAT, the jet stream, mountain wave, which is a bit different to what we covered. So if you're interested in that and you want to know everything about the cruise, then I'd watch this video next. With that, fly happy, fly safe.